So the agenda for today's webinar, I will give a quick overview of IRENA. I will then introduce our panelists for today. They will give their presentations. Following that, we will have a question and answer period. And then we will have a quick feedback session where we will share with you a short poll to get your feedback on this webinar. So for those of you that aren't aware, IRENA is the International Renewable Energy Agency. We are an intergovernmental organization that supports countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future. We currently have 132 member states around the world and 37 states in accession. And our role as an organization is to serve as a center of excellence and a repository for policy, technology, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. One of the many projects of IRENA is the IRENA Renewable Energy Learning Partnership, which hosts the IRENA webinar series. If you're interested to know more about other webinars that we offer, you can go to our website, www.irena.org/IRELP, and subscribe to our newsletter. And you can also find many other resources and tools for education in the renewable energy sector. So we have over 3,000 courses, webinars, training guides, and internship opportunities within our website. I also encourage you to join the IRENA community by going to www.irena.org/community. The IRENA community is an open platform where people can ask questions, share ideas, and start debate about renewable energy topics. And today we will use the IRENA community to follow up to the discussions from this webinar. If you have questions that you aren't able to ask during the webinar, we encourage you to go to the community, and you can do that by visiting the link provided. You will need to register, as you see in the top red box. And on the bottom right corner of your screen, you will see a featured topic. And this is where we will be continuing the discussion on the webinar, and our panelists will be available there to answer any questions you might have. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists for today. Our first speaker will be Mr. Ambika Adhikari. He is a program manager at the Office of Knowledge Enterprise Development at Arizona State University. He manages the VOCTEC program. He's also a senior sustainability scientist at ASU's Global Institute of Sustainability and a faculty associate in the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning at Arizona State University. Our next speaker will be Rim Razouk. She is a senior instructional designer at Arizona State University. In her current position, she leads the curriculum development and assessment and evaluation process for the VOCTEC program. And our final speaker will be Ilham Taleb. She currently works for IRENA in designing and implementing capacity building programs to assist developing countries in their transition to renewable energy futures. Among her projects, she is working on a certification scheme of solar PV installers where she has coordinated a multi-stakeholder partnership to implement a quality standard-based certification of solar PV installers. And I will now pass the floor to my colleague Ambika.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Stephanie, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's my pleasure to be participating in this webinar. The topic today that myself and Dr. Razouk, who is my colleague, will be presenting is an introduction to the Vocational Training and Education for Clean Energy program called VOCTEC. My name is Ambika Adhikari, and I manage the program as Stephanie introduced me. And the presentation today is, there are 4 objectives of the presentation that between myself and Dr. Razouk will be presenting to you. We'll be introducing the VOCTEC program to you, its background, the objectives, the partners that we have, the types of training that we offer, and the training components. We would also highlight for you the VOCTEC training workshops already done and some in planning, and we'll summarize some of the ones that we are undertaking right now. We will introduce the assessment and evaluation system that we use as a university of the training. And then eventually, at the end, we'll discuss the applicability of the program, the lessons that we learned, and what are our future programs so that it could also be useful to you. So part one, there are total 4 parts in this presentation today. I will be presenting the part 1 and 2. Dr. Razouk will be presenting part 3 and 4. The part 1 is the basic introduction and the objective. The vocational program, the vocational training and education in clean energy was conceived just because many of the investments that we make in clean energy systems all across the world oftentimes fail, not because of the bad investment, but because of the lack of capacity in the local community to maintain and operate these programs. So that was the basic motivation, that we need to build the human capacity. So following that, the objective of the VOCTEC program is to build awareness, knowledge, and capacity of the local stakeholders in developing countries, and to sustain renewable energy system investments so that any program where there's an investment done, there's going to be enough people with information, technology, and skills to continue to maintain the program and run to the best of their levels. We have many, many program partners in this particular system. The partners are government institutions like USAID. The basic program of the VOCTEC is mainly funded by the United States Agency for International Development. I'll go into a little bit of detail on that later on. We also have a supplementary support from the New Zealand government through the New Zealand Foreign Affairs and Trade Ministry, New Zealand MPAT. And obviously, we are very honored and privileged to work with IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. I will discuss a little bit of that later on. We also, in this VOCTEC program, we also have a project with the Inter-American Development Bank. These are only some of the examples that I am providing to you. We have industry partners like the Green Empowerment, which are on partners in training into the microhydro programs. The Dutch NGO, TNO Innovation, the Tetra Tech, one of the larger American consulting companies, and obviously our own Arizona State University, which leads all this VOCTEC program, works with Appalachian State University in North Carolina and the University of the South Pacific, which is a regional hub of our training, which is based in Suva in the Pacific. So what is VOCTEC? VOCTEC essentially consists of 3 different types of technology and 3 different training levels. So we have a matrix of actually 9 permutation and combination. The 3 renewable energy technologies that VOCTEC uses are solar photovoltaic, microhydro, and small wind. And I'll go into a little bit of detail on that later on. All of them are, the solar photovoltaic is only off-grid, the microhydro can be either, and small wind. And in each of these 3 technologies, we have 3 different training levels that we call level 3, level 2, and level 1, L3, L2, and L1. The L3 is the workshop that we do basically between 1 to 3 days to policy and decision makers so that people have the skills, informations, and database to make a decision on what kind of renewable energy technology is most suitable for their particular community, for their particular society, country, and the region. The L2, which is the training for educators and engineers, that follows the train the trainer model, is the crux and the core of this VOCTEC program. That's what really gets all these programs running. In other words, we train the educators themselves and leave them in their community so that they can continue to train the workforce, the L1 level technicians. In our program, we make sure that we also start, when we go to a particular community to train, after we train the educators, we also support them in the initial training of the technicians so that they can be on their own after a while. So those are the 3 levels on the 3 types of technologies. So what are some of the objectives and components of the VOCTEC program, the Vocational Training and Education for Clean Energy? Essentially, the idea of the training is to build an infrastructure. So We try to, wherever we go with our partners, we try to create the lab, the laboratory, and the equipments, and also provide, I have a new slide later on about the mobile training toolkits, which is an independent, self-standing, and complete off-the-box training material for the solar PV. And this is established through the curriculum and certification program that are mandated and created for a specific place, so that that particular curriculum, whether it is in microhydro, whether it is in solar PV or on the wind, is completely fitted to a particular location and contextualized with the curriculum and so on. And with those kind of infrastructure and the curriculum, which constitutes the manual and so many other elements, we build a human capacity. Like I said, we train policymakers, educators, and technical workforce. The middle educators are the key and the foundations and the main pillar of the VOCTEC program. It's not only a technical training, it also has entrepreneurship, communication, teaching, and gender elements incorporated into all of the training. As a university, we want to make sure that all those elements are completely taken care of. It's not only technology, it's not only technicians, it is all those that make that program sustainable. People have to establish the business through entrepreneurship. They have to be able to communicate what they're doing. They have to be able to understand how to teach, and obviously gender is extremely important. Having role from the female and male both sides is extremely important to sustain any clean energy investment. Then as a university, we not only just train, we assess and evaluate both in the short term, just to see the impact, and also the long-term timeline, the longitudinal impact of what we do and what remains after we leave in the program. To support all of the programs that I just described, we implement what we call a VLE, a virtual learning environment that resides within the ASU's computer, and it is accessible to all our alumni of the training into the program. They can create an account and they can get into a program and then continue to learn and discuss. So let me go spend a minute on the mobile training toolkits, which is one of the important innovations that we have found and we have created for this particular program. Here is a box which is about 65 kilos, about 3.5 feet by 2.5 feet, 18 inch to 2 feet depth. You can roll it. It's a strong box. You can take it with you. It has 33 different components of the solar PV that can give you a complete solar PV technology right there to train. It can train up to 6 people. So you can carry it to a remote area, establish with the solar panel, the charge controllers, the batteries, the all kinds of wiring and equipments and inverters. You can make a complete system. If you assemble and disassemble and show it to the educators, they have a pretty full understanding of how to go for the training on the solar photovoltaic. So this is one of the very popular elements that we've been giving to all the different institutions, about 13, 14 different institutions that we work right now. We give them free of cost, courtesy of the USAID, 3 each to each one of them. And they have been tested for each particular locality. Right now we have a big program in Fiji, and we give 3 each to any of the 11 partners that we have. On the part 2, let me talk a little bit about the training workshop and the projects. We have a portfolio which is pretty mixed. Here is an example. The largest, of course, is the USAID, which is supplemented by the New Zealand impact money. We do photovoltaic, microhydro, small wind all across the world. So we have programs in the Pacific, in Africa, India, and we are also planning to expand the program in other places. And then we work with TNO, as I mentioned before, the University of Virgin Islands. Then we have programs in Ghana, in Kumasi Polytechnic, and also with Inter-American Development Bank in Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad Tobago. And obviously, we are very privileged again to work with IRENA. We have 3 different programs with them on entrepreneurship, photovoltaic certifications, and online community learnings. So here are some highlights of what we do. The technician training that we completed very recently in 2012 was in Aruba. We have about 30 people trained, and those numbers will be given by Dr. Rozuk in a while. In Suba for the solar educator, who have already begun to train other people. and then the technician training that we've been supporting in Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and Tonga, and many other different countries. In Liberia, we recently completed a microhydro technician for about 20 people, training, and 10 different countries in the Pacific, we have the technician training in the solar PVs that are ongoing. For example, Samoa, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, and so on. With IRENA, I mentioned we have 3 different programs. We completed one entrepreneurship training to help people establish their own businesses in Vanuatu and Solomon Islands. The West Africa Solar Technician training in 4 different countries, 5 different countries is ongoing right now. That will help them build a certification program just like NAVCEP, the North American Board for Certified Energy Professionals that we use in US and Canada. The IRELP, which Stephanie described earlier, the knowledge advisory that Arizona State University is helping IRENA on the IREL project also. The Inter-American Development Bank project that we are working on the 3 different countries of Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad Tobago also likes to build the capacity and sustainable energy communication and information. So it kind of really jives with the VOCTEC program that we are doing right now. With this, I'm going to give it to my colleague, Dr. Raju, to speak on part 3 and part 4. And we will be coming back later on for any questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. I have the pleasure to be participating in this webinar today. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, my name is Reem Razouk and I'm the Senior Instructional Designer on the VOCTEC program. In the coming 2 parts of this presentation, I'm going to talk briefly about the assessment and the evaluation process and accomplishments, the applicability of the program, of VOCTEC program, some lessons learned that we've learned from the training, and some future plans. The assessment and evaluation process is usually an important part of any training program, not only because it provides feedback on the trainees' performance and learning and the effectiveness of the instructions, but also because the insights gained from the data and from the trainees themselves allow us to improve the current program and the future trainings as well. The assessment and the evaluation framework that we've been using, as you can see in this figure, is adapted from the Kirkpatrick evaluation model, which actually includes 4 measurement areas. The reaction, which is the participants' perception of and satisfaction with the design and delivery of the training program. The learning, which is the extent to which the participants acquire new knowledge or learn new knowledge and skills. The third measure is behavior, which is the confidence or perception of the participants and their ability to apply the newly learned knowledge and skills after they receive the training. The fourth measure is the impact, which is actually the evaluation of the long-term impact of the training on the trainees' knowledge acquisition and application of skills, and also their attitude toward the training after a couple of months. We've been doing this only with the educators, which is the L2 training, and that's because those are the people we are actually able we have access to and we are able to reach within 6 to 8 months after the training takes place. So those are the four measures. For the reaction measure, the area of evaluation, as I mentioned before, is related to the perceptions, which is attitudes. So in order to measure this, we've been using attitudinal surveys that allow us to collect quantitative and qualitative data. With respect to learning, we have 4 areas of evaluation. 3 related to content, non-technical content, as Ambika mentioned before, and this includes, might include topics like gender, awareness, entrepreneurship skills, teaching strategies and methodologies. Advanced content, technical content, which is related to technicians, and the hands-on activities that the technicians perform using the mobile training toolkit that also Ambika introduced. For the 3 content areas, we use as the measurement tools pre- and post-knowledge assessments, and for the hands-on activities, we've been also using hands-on evaluation forms that allow us to collect, again, quantitative and qualitative data. Why we've been applying the pre-assessments, the objective of using the pre-assessment in the beginning, before any training is delivered, is to determine the participants' knowledge level prior to the delivery of the training content. And in turn, we will be able to compare between the pre and the post data, which allows us to determine the change in learning by the end of the training. With respect to behavior, again, we're measuring the area of evaluation here is attitudes and the confidence of the trainees in their ability to apply the knowledge and skills that they've learned. We've been using attitudinal surveys. And for the 4th measure, impact, we've been measuring after 6 to 8 months after the training, we've been measuring the long-term knowledge acquisition in addition to attitudes toward the training. And to measure these, we've been using knowledge assessments and attitudinal surveys as well. This is a snapshot about some of the training statistics. So far, we trained 135 technicians. We have a plan for this year to train 130 technicians. Some of these trainings been already taking place. So maybe out of these 130 so far, within the last month, we've trained already like 30 technicians additional. 33 educators been also trained. 25 are planned to be trained this year. Again, a training been taking place actually last week to train additional couple educators. 32 policymakers been trained too, and 15 are planned to be trained this year, and 20 entrepreneurs been trained so far. This table actually shows a snapshot of the training results with respect to different trainings that we've done so far that are funded by USAID and IRENA. For trainers in the training for Pacific, in the Pacific for the solar photovoltaic, we had 94% of the trainees were male and 6% were female. And as you can see from the table, in almost all the trainings we had high increase in knowledge, high satisfaction with respect to reaction on a scale of 5.5 being the highest, and with respect to behavior, which is again the confidence in their ability to perform the skills learned, again high average in all the trainings. In the first one, which is the L2 training, we can see that when we apply the impact, the results show that the learning was maintained even after 6 months from the training, and the positive behavior also was maintained. And those educators in turn trained around 140 technicians through their institutions. Again, the second row actually shows the technician training in the Pacific for solar PV and technician training and micro hydro that happened in Liberia. Again, very high satisfaction with the training and confidence in ability, and a high increase in knowledge from pre to post assessment. With respect to the IRENA entrepreneurship training, we had 75% of the participants were female, 25% were male. Again, very high satisfaction and very high confidence, and 20% increase in learning. For some of you, you might think that 20% increase is a law. You might be wondering why we only had 20%, or this percentage is actually low with respect to all the other trainings. While actually, it is worth mentioning that those trainees entered were mainly either entrepreneurs or have very high level of education with respect to solar energy. So the pre-assessment actually indicated that they already had, and the background surveys already indicated that they already had a very high prerequisite skills from before the training, which means 20% increase after the training still achieved. This is a very high percentage. Now I will briefly talk about the applicability of the VOCTEC program, lessons learned throughout the trainings, and some future plans. The VOCTEC program is applicable to many regions and countries because it provides customized and localized training services in different areas. VOCTEC is not only limited to providing technical material, as Ambika was saying before. However, it incorporates non-technical content such as gender awareness and social awareness, in addition to providing supporting tools, assessments, and measurements, and virtual learning platform. It's also worth mentioning that we also provide the educators, when we train them, with all of the technician material and content, in addition to templates, supporting materials, all the activities they need, and the assessments that actually allow them to modify and customize the curriculum as needed to meet the needs of their trainees, or even to create their own new modules using those templates and following the templates. This figure actually shows the components that go into VOCTEC. So VOCTEC includes technical and non-technical material, as we mentioned before, like social awareness and gender inclusion. It also includes provides the online platform, which is a virtual learning environment that is a comprehensive online learning, collaboration, and dissemination platform that promotes best practices, and that includes discussion forums and content repository for the educators. VOCTEC also provides games that reinforce specific important skills. For example, troubleshooting of a solar PV system. We have games for troubleshooting a solar PV system or sizing a solar PV system, just to reinforce the skills taught. And it also provides supporting materials such as the end user poster that the technicians can, that the educators can give for the technicians, and then in turn the technicians can use in order to educate the end users. It also provides manuals and guidelines, in addition to handbooks that that include elaborated content and activities, and finally assessment tools and measurements to assess and evaluate the outcome and the impact of the trainings. Throughout the trainings, we've learned lessons in many areas such as housing, budgeting, planning and development, assessment, and logistics. These lessons are being applied to continuously improve the VOCTEC program. I'll talk briefly about each and provide an example. So with respect to logistics and housing, we've learned that it's very important to ensure that logistics, transportations, and security issues are properly organized for any site visits related to the training. We also learned that ensuring the availability of proper and adequate housing for the trainers and trainees within a reasonable distance from the training site is actually very crucial. With respect to budgeting and cash funds, it is important to have adequate budget and to allocate enough time for shipping, ground transportation, customs, and local storage when shipping training materials to other countries. Also, having cash funds available with you on hand for any unforeseen and immediate needs is very important. Detailed planning and development of any material in timely fashion to provide enough time for review. This is very important, especially when we notice that this is very important, especially when we are collaborating with different subject matter experts to create the curriculum, and approval is needed for content. For us, it also appeared that it's more efficient if we ask the educators in advance to create their accounts on the VLE, to create their username and accounts on the VLE, on the virtual learning environment, because it saves time. Concerning the assessment and evaluation process, it is very important to assign an assessment and evaluation liaison individual to administer and collect all the assessments and to make sure they are collected in the right order when needed, and in order not to miss any of the assessments. We also learned that establishing a quality review mechanism and process for assessment is also very important, since the subject matter experts need to approve the assessment items, and we need to make sure that every assessment item is actually related to a specific learning objective and is measuring a specific learning objective. Finally, we created step-by-step guidelines to help the instructors who are actually collecting or administering the assessments. Because again, the order of the assessments can affect the reliability of the results, and this process is important to be well executed. Some of the ongoing and future projects. This is a snapshot of some of the ongoing and future projects. As Ambika mentioned before, USAID, we have a couple of projects going on with USAID. We still have some upcoming trainings for technicians, for educators and policymakers in solar PV and microhydro. Again, with IRENA, we are working on we have with them 2 projects now ongoing, the certification program in West Africa and the IREL web community that Ambika also talked about before. We have the Bridge Renewable Energy Program in the Caribbean and the Solar Photovoltaic Workshop for the faculty in the University of Virgin Islands. Our plans are to keep expanding by taking on new projects and conducting more trainings on clean energy in different countries. With the following objectives in mind: increasing quality of people's lives, increasing work opportunities and sustainability, ensuring that the workforce possesses the skills and techniques needed to design, install, and maintain clean energy systems. And last but not least, ensuring the ability of transferring the right skills for future generations. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for participating in the webinar. If you have any questions about VOCTEC that you think we can help with after the webinar is over, please don't hesitate to contact me or Ambika on our emails. And now I hand the presentation to Ilham. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Rim and Ambika, for that excellent presentation. And now I pass the floor to my colleague, Ilham. You could go ahead.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for the previous introduction, and thank you very much to Ambika and Reem for the very informative presentation. First of all, I'd like to make sure that everyone can hear me clearly. Is
yes,
everything?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Thanks.
Okay. So, perfect. Okay, great. It's really my pleasure to join you today. I can see that we have quite a bit of, a good number of attendees in the audience, so this is really great. Hi everyone, my name is Ilham Talab, and I hope that you will enjoy and actually benefit from the discussion next. So today, as the title of the presentation indicates, I'm going to be speaking about one of the capacity building projects of IRENA, which is the certification program for solar PV installers. Basically, how do we build capacities of solar PV installers to help sustain the growth of the industry? Now, the main objective of this presentation is to share with you our experiences here at IRENA and also help to get your feedback as well. Of course, this is only one of the projects of capacity building. We have many other projects, and I hope that we will get the opportunity to also discuss them with you in future webinars. So the content of this presentation will start with the rationale, basically why we are doing this project, what are the expected benefits to the region and the member countries, and then moving forward to describe some of the key terms, basically the terminology involved in a certification scheme. And then I will try to zoom out and give you the general picture of what to expect when we actually develop the infrastructure for an industry-based certification, just so that we don't get lost into the details. After that, we'll move into the details by trying to ask 10 questions that we can consider, or we should consider, if we would like to establish such a program. And then hopefully I'll have some time to go briefly and describe our experiences in the Pacific Islands and our plans for the future in West Africa. So basically, why are we starting the regional industry-based certification, and why are we in specific choosing solar PV as a technology to apply the certification to? Very simply answering the first question, of course, when you do a certification program, basically what you're doing is you're ensuring the quality of trainings that are being provided, and at the same time you're avoiding the sporadic training, spread of training programs that really maybe do not add up, and sometimes they waste resources more than they add value. If you notice in the title, the certification is actually industry-based. What we mean by that is that there is a market value for the trainings. This means that the trainings will actually help the individuals to develop skills that actually respond to a specific market need. And therefore, it's much more probable they will find jobs in the market, and that the training will be actually responding to a specific market need. Also, having the certification on a regional level is very important because it allows for the mobility of the certified technicians within the region. Now, of course, this also could help to ensure that more jobs will be, or at least some jobs will be available for these trainees. And it could also, we could argue that it could help minimize the impact of brain drain. Of course, this is a very complicated and highly controversial issue, but maybe just some food for thought. And finally, of course, by establishing such a certification program, one would ensure the continuity of trainings, that these trainings are provided on a continuous basis and they're not a single-time intervention. And of course, this is much better in terms of the long-term impact of the trainings. Now, moving next to the second question, trying to see why did we select solar PV as a technology to start with for the certification program. Now, obviously, last year we have seen that solar PV market hit a record, as indicated by many reports, including the Global Status Report, where it indicated that more capacity has been installed by solar PV than any other technology, except perhaps for hydropower. The total installed capacity last year actually was up to 40 gigawatt, making the total global installed capacity reach up to 140 gigawatt. So, with the decline of prices, we know that this technology is going to continue to be used on a very high level. So how do we sustain the growth of such technology? In order to do that, we minimum in terms of quality and capacity building, we need two things. The first one is quality manufactured equipment, which is a completely different story. Here we'll be talking about the standards for the equipment themselves, which is not the scope of this presentation. And the second component that we need is trained, and not only trained, but actually certified practitioners. In this case, we are talking about installers. So by this program, we aim and we hope to try to bridge the gap and try to contribute to building that sort of highly skilled human capacities that will actually help sustain the growth of the solar PV industry. Now, another important point is that by ensuring that the systems are being installed properly, we're actually enhancing the system performance. And this is very important, and actually you'll be surprised to see to what extent would this actually affect the system performance. Just a couple of weeks ago, I heard a story from my colleagues here that in one of the countries, they tested two PV systems. They were actually identical systems, and they tested them in the same area, but they were installed by two different installation teams, two different installers. And they found that the performance of the system varied by up to 20%. This is a huge percentage. So if we can really ensure that we are following the right standards, that we are installing the systems properly, then of course the system performance will also be enhanced. And also customers are an important part of the equation, which sometimes we kind of forget about, and I'm sure that many of you maybe have even experienced this firsthand when you find, for example, in the off-grid sector where customers just lose confidence in the systems, and then you have a considerable decline in the sales of the systems, not really because of market saturation, but because the customer just lost the confidence in the system. So by basically ensuring that the systems are installed properly, we can tackle this issue. And of course, when you ensure that the systems are also installed properly, you sort of give an indirect guarantee to the financiers that would help lower their perceived risk and hence contribute to lowering the cost of financing. And finally, of course, by following the proper standards and guidelines, we will make sure that the safety procedures are being followed. Okay, so now we know why we are doing this project. I hope that you have a very good understanding of the rationale behind it. I will move now to the second aspect, which is terminology. Now this is quite important, and I really would like you to follow me here because it's very important that we are all on the same page. Some of you might know about this, so please bear with me if this is quite repetition for you. But I just selected 5 keywords that I thought constitute the core of any discussion on certification scheme. And without this, you will kind of maybe you will know what does this mean in general, but you won't really distinguish between the different terms because there's a lot of commonalities between them. And actually, when I was trying to simplify the definitions, I found that they're actually interrelated. So when you define one, you must somehow use another one. It's like the chicken and egg problem. So I tried as much as possible to simplify the definitions and to list them in this particular order to minimize this issue. So to start with, I'm going to start with the first two, which is certification and accreditation. And as you can see, both of them are quite similar, and in fact, both of them, many times they are used interchangeably, although this is not 100% accurate. It's true that both certification and accreditation refer to the process by which a specific subject of interest is being qualified by an objective evaluating body as having met a certain set of requirements. These requirements are usually referred to as standards. However, the difference between the two is that when you certify something, then your subject of certification would be usually an individual. In this case, we're talking about solar PV installers. It could also be a product or a process or service, but that's not our discussion here. However, when you talk about accrediting something, then your target would be actually an institution. You would accredit an institution or a training program or a course. And we see this in the education sector when we say, for example, that this university is accredited formally by this entity. So I hope that this distinction is clear. Now, when we talk about the certification metrics, these basically refer to the competency standards against which the person will be certified in our case. What we mean by this is what are the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the tasks that this person, this installer, must develop during the training so that we can assess him and at the end certify him or her. The certification metrics are usually referred to as competency standards or job task analysis. In this presentation, I'm going to stick to the term job task analysis to refer to these certification metrics. And just to give you another, like a much more clearer and simpler definition, basically this really simply just describes the list of skills. What you have usually is a list of skills, many skills depending on the task or the technology that we're talking about. And these skills usually would have a ranking system. So in many of the times you have, for example, a 3-level ranking system. For example, skill A would be either critical or very important or just important. And then based on that ranking system, you will assess the candidates for the certification, and based on that you will certify the candidate. For example, in terms of installation of solar PV systems, for on-grid, for example, systems, one task could be assemble modules, panels, and support structures as specified by module manufacturer or design. And the rank could be critical. So it's very critical for the installer to be able to assemble the modules and the panels and the support structure as specified by the design. Okay, excellent. So now we have two more left, standards and license. And standards basically, as the name indicates, these are definitions or frameworks that are really widely used and regularly used and agreed upon. And the main objective of the standard is to really help achieve an optimum degree of order in a specific context. In our case, we are interested in increasing or enhancing the optimum performance of solar PV modules. And of course, this gets a little bit more complicated because sometimes you also have to consider the full system quality, which means that we're talking not only about the certification of individuals that will install your system according to standards, but also we're talking about the quality of service and also the quality of hardware. And this really becomes a much more deeper area. And I'd like just to note here that IRENA is doing a lot of work in terms of system quality and standardization for renewable energy technologies. Our colleagues are doing some work in this area, and you can find a lot of more details in our website about this. But this is really not the subject of this presentation. Now, licenses is the last terminology term here, which I involved I invoked in order to be able to indicate the difference between license and certification. There's a lot of commonality between them. Basically, they're both a credential that is provided by an authority to an individual, but in terms of licensing, it has more of a legal and compulsory connotation. So it's something like your driving license. Something that you must do in order to be able to drive. So there is more focus on the legal connotation than on the skill connotation if you compare it to certification. Very good. So now we're done with terminology. I really hope that you grasp the differences between these terms because I'm going to be using them a lot in the coming slides. And to move forward, I will be now taking a step backward. And before we dive into the details, I would like to take a step backward and explain to you the general picture of setting an industry-based certification scheme. What does it really mean? What does it take to actually end up with a certified installer? And in order to do this, I found that the easiest way to do this is to move backwards. So please make sure that you understand that this flow diagram that I'm going to describe here, it's actually moving backwards. I'm going to start with things that we are much more familiar with and move step by step to the background details that we will then come to in details in the next slides. So basically, in the picture that you see here to the left side, it's a certified person, it's an installer that has been certified. What does it take to have this certified installer? Of course, we would imagine that he must have taken a certification exam in order to be awarded with the certification, with the certificate itself. And this means that the person had attended a training program or a course. Now, in a kind of a simplistic form, we can say that this training course is based on inputs from 3 different components. We have the certified trainers, we have the national or regional training provider, which is the institution that will provide the training, and we have the training material. Now, I'm going to go a little bit in detail into each one of them. The certified trainer, of course, himself or herself need to undertake a similar full cycle to become certified, and this is as simple as that. For the regional or national training provider, in this case, this entity, this institution, will need to be accredited. And I hope now that you can relate to the definitions that we just explained. So this institution, either national or regional level, will need to be accredited by an authority or an accreditation body on the national and on a regional level. And in the process, this accreditation process itself will need to follow international standards. So what do we mean by that? There are many international bodies that provide guidelines of how such accreditation process needs to be conducted in order to make sure that all the different accreditation processes across the globe are actually harmonized. Now, these institutions, I'm sure that many of you are aware of, for example, the ISO, the International Organization for Standardization. We also have IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, and we have the ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. So some of these institutions could be used to provide the international standards to perform this accreditation of this institution. Now, the training material. The training material, which is the course content, needs to follow certain job task analyses that we described before in the terminology. And just as a backup, when we said that the job task analysis will list the skills that the installer need to acquire from the training, which means that the training program, the training material, the course, need to be based on these skills. It needs to deliver these skills to the person. Now, it's very important, since we are talking about a regional certification program, that these job task analyses be harmonized across the region. So how do we develop these job task analyses or these sets of skills that we need to design our course based upon. How do we develop them and how do we harmonize them? This is the job of the technical committee that would actually sit at a regional level, which we call technical committee. And this technical committee would actually be the main function of this committee would be to design these job task analyses and ensure that they are harmonized at a regional level. But the technical committee at the regional level gets its inputs, of course, as you might imagine, from the national level. So we have representatives from each country that is involved in the regional certification, and from each country we have actually representatives from a wide range of stakeholders, from the government, from the private sector, and from academia. And all of these stakeholders, they would provide their inputs to the regional technical committee in terms of what skills are needed to respond to the industry needs. Of course, before everything, we need to ensure that we have a political will and we have support and we have stakeholders that will actually champion the process. This is extremely important because without this, it's very, very difficult to mobilize all of these actors to provide the financing required and to implement this. So I hope now, by looking at this structure, maybe you can, if you would like, go properly backwards, the other way around, starting from the political will, the national level, regional level, and so on. And I really hope that you would grasp the bigger picture of what does it take to build a regional industry-based certification infrastructure. Okay, now I'm going to go more into the details by actually saying, okay, now we know what is this all about. How do we do it? Where do we start from? To answer this question, I'm giving you 10 questions that could be considered by stakeholders if they would like to actually embark on such a program. And the first question is, why do you need a certification program? It's very important to identify the need and to validate the need, because this will help you really customize the program to your needs, and it will help ensure that this is something demand-driven from the country and from the region, and it's not an initiative that is dropped upon you and you have to deal with it. The second question is there a political buy-in for the certification program? It's not only important to ask this question, but it's also more important to try to investigate at what level do you have the political will. Is this political will at a national level or at a regional level? This is very important because sometimes you actually would be surprised, but you would have a much more support at a regional level. You would have a strong regional entity that is 100% committed to develop this, and then it would make much more sense to start from the regional level and then mobilize actors at the national level. So answering this question will help guide you to determine where to start from. The third question is, do you understand the terminology? As you saw, I just mentioned 5 key terms at the beginning of this presentation, and there are many, many other terms. If you go into the details of this topic, it's very important that you understand the difference between the different technologies, and it's also different terminologies, sorry, and it's also important to investigate if there is any difference in the meaning between at the local level and at an international level. This is sometimes the case, and it would create some confusion within the process. It's very good to clear this at the beginning of the process. The fourth question is, who are the relevant stakeholders? And this could be at the national, regional, and the international level. Now there is a host of stakeholders, and the list goes on, but this is the main, very important and critical ones that you must get in touch with and you must mobilize. You have the government, the private sector, the academia, certification and licensing and standards bodies in your country and region. You have your power utilities, of course, the financing community, development community, NGOs, and finally the consumers themselves. The fifth question is, who are the key actors that will support and who are the key actors that will oppose the certification? You might be surprised, although that this whole concept of certification sounds extremely relevant and added value, but some small number might actually voice concerns due to many reasons. And it's very important that you consider this and try to mobilize them as well at a very early stage of the process. And the sixth question is, what components of the certification infrastructure that you do have exist already that you can build upon instead of starting from scratch? This is extremely important because it would make much more sense to start incrementally, build on what you have. Usually there is so much going on in terms of trainings, in terms of certification, but it's really not homogenized. It's not really structured in a certain framework, whether on the national or the regional level. So it's very important to break down the different components that you have and try to build upon it. For example, do you have a large PV industry? Do you have an industry association? Do you have training programs for solar PV? Is there existing trainers locally? And maybe you have other training programs, not really directly related to solar PV, for example, electrical or mechanical trades. Is there any sort of certification related to solar PV? Do you have any bodies, whether on national or regional level, that do accredit any training programs that you can start with? So these are key considerations to help you start with what you have. The seventh question is, what are the planned PV-related projects in the short and long term? And of course, obviously, you must go through this exercise in order to size your project and determine the scope of your project and the timeline. So that once you have your trainers, once you have your certified installers, it will hopefully coincide with the launching of your project. So they would have some jobs for them. And number 8 is, who are the finance actors that could support the certification? This is a very important and critical question, and I will talk a little bit more about it when I describe our experience in the Pacific Islands. The 9th question is, what administrative structure should you follow to develop the framework of certification? This is actually the core of the whole process, because what you need to build is what we call a regional administrative body, which is a group of representatives from a national level. They come together and they generate, or they develop, the regional administrative body. And the main task of this body is to host different committees. One of them will be the technical committee. And as I mentioned previously, the technical committee is responsible to develop the job task analyses, the skills, the list of skills based on which the trainings will be designed and developed. So here you have actually two different options. You can, depending on which side is stronger, is it the regional side or the country national side? You can either start, if you have a strong regional entity, you can start from the regional level and then go down and mobilize actors from the national level and identify those representatives from the national level. On the other hand, sometimes you really do not have such a strong regional entity, and you need to start by mobilizing actors from each country, and then they come together and they decide on how to design the regional administrative body and which regional entity the regional administrative body should sit within. And because this entity will eventually become the legal representation of the whole program. They will provide an administrator, they will provide support staff, they will provide a host, they will actually host the administrative body. So you must consider these different options depending on the context that you're dealing with and the strength levels between the regional and national levels. And finally, the last question, number 10, is how will you ensure the sustainability and the relevance of the certification program, given that the technology evolves, meaning that you have new materials, new techniques, standards, and so on, and this eventually will mean that the skills required will also develop and change over time. So there must be some sort of an update mechanism, monitoring and evaluation to help you always be up to date with the needs of the industry, especially that we're talking about an industry-based certification program, which means that you have always to keep in mind the needs of the market. Okay, these are the 10 questions that we thought constitutes the basics, really basic starting point for anyone who would like to consider and investigate building such certification framework. And I'm going now to move forward to explain to you a little bit about our experience in the Pacific Islands and then in West Africa. So in the Pacific Islands, basically, it's a little bit different because when we get there, we found that they already have many components of the infrastructure of certification already developed by regional entities. So you have the SIAPI, which is the Sustainable Energy Industry Association of the Pacific Island, and the Utility Association, which is the Power Pacific Association. These two entities, in addition to the University of South Pacific and many other entities in the region, have come together and have actually already came up or made up the Regional Technical Committee. And the Regional Technical Committee, as we said before, has already developed the technical standards for some technologies. So here we're talking about solar PV on-grid certification scheme. And they're actually working, or as far as I know, have already completed the technical guidelines or the job task analysis for also of the off-grid sector. So, however, the whole program was actually dormant because there was no financing, there was no support, financial support to help drive the whole program. And this is a very important lesson because you can develop the whole program, there is no issue, but when it comes to implementing the trainings, there is a lot of cost associated with that, bringing the certified trainers, bringing the equipment to train on, the training material, the cost of bringing everybody together in one place, and many other cost components that add up. And what happened in the Pacific that they couldn't actually drive the process because of the lack of funding. And what we did in IRENA, our role was basically to help kickstart this process by providing the needed fund. And we got a very good response. So far we have over 50 trainees enrolled from 6 islands. And as you can see, these are the islands involved: Fiji, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Samoa, Tonga, and I cannot see the last one. I hope that you can see it in the presentation. We have found that this had given a very good response, and therefore we decided to launch a full-fledged certification scheme for technicians of solar PV in West Africa. Now, when we move to West Africa, it's a little bit different because in West Africa there is no infrastructure whatsoever. There is a lot of things happening here and there, but it's not cohesively and coherently coming together in a regional infrastructure. And so what we're doing in Western Africa is really starting from scratch, developing the full program. This is very similar to the diagram that I went through in the previous slides. So our partner here is the West African Economic and Monetary Union, and we're basically working with 5 member countries, which also my colleague Ambika mentioned. And of course, this is a project that we are working with. In implementing this project, we're actually working with Arizona State University, our colleagues, Ambika and Dream, and also pioneer experts who actually were involved in setting the certification program for solar PV installers in North America, which is the NAVSEP, that also Ambika mentioned. So we came together, all of us, and we are trying to gradually implement this certification scheme in West Africa. You can see here the different phases involved, basically starting from identifying a regional training provider or a regional administrative body, in other words, that will develop the job task analysis. Now, why regional? Because it happened that in West Africa we have the West African Economic and Monetary Union, which is extremely willing and supporting provides a lot of support for this initiative, and it just makes sense because all of these countries that we are working with, the 5 member countries, Benin, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Senegal, they have a lot of commonalities between them, and in terms of the training, the training context, and it just makes sense to start on a regional level. So we're starting on a regional level, identifying the certification provider on a regional level, and then moving down to the national level, trying to find local universities, technical colleges, and vocational training centers that would actually prepare the training curricula based on the harmonized job task analyses that have been developed on a regional level. Okay, so I hope that you can see now the picture. And in the process, we will, of course, ensure that these training providers at the national level are being accredited by an agency at a national level, and so that they are being recognized formally, basically accredited, and also that the whole process of establishing the certification scheme and qualifying these installers is accredited internationally. And this is what we mean by, for example, the ISO IEC 17024. This is one of the standards that tells you what are the steps that you need to follow in order to make sure that the whole process is harmonized following certain guidelines. So basically everyone in the globe is following these guidelines, and so at the end of the day the whole certification process is harmonized globally. And this is basically having the international accreditation and the regional harmonization is what makes this program very, very special, and it's what constitutes the novelty for this program, these two components. And in terms of the system sizes, I forgot to mention here that we are targeting small-scale applications for households and businesses of up to 10 kilowatt. And basically at the end of the presentation, I would like really to acknowledge our partners. As I mentioned, we're working quite closely with the Arizona State University, with Institute of Sustainable Power and Mr. Jack Werner, Pacific Power Association, Sustainable Energy Industry Association of the Pacific, and finally in West Africa, the West African Economic and Monetary Union. Thank you very much. I hope that you continue, then you follow the presentation. I thank you very much for your attention. I know that the topic is quite heavy and it involves lots of terminology, so thank you very much. These are the references, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ilham, for that excellent presentation. So now we will have about 15 minutes for question and answer. And then following that, we will have a short survey for all of our viewers today. So for questions to begin with, we had some people asking how they can access the slides following the webinar. These are all currently available on the IRENA community. So if you go to www.irena.org/community and under featured topics, you will find all of the presentations. They will also be made available on the IRENA website under the events archive on the homepage of IRENA. So our first question was directed to ASU, and they're wondering how are the trainees and institutions selected for the VOCTEC program. So I'll hand the floor over to Ambika first, and Rim, maybe you can add as well.
Yeah, Stephanie, thank you for that question. For the VOCTEC project, which is funded by USAID, in terms of selecting the institutions and places and trainees, there are certain criteria we had agreed upon, but it basically depends on the demand for that training to be done. So for example, in the 10 countries in the Pacific, we have 11 different partners. We initially went and did an assessment trip and looked at the demands and need for the training and how much renewable energy installation has taken place, and how much is the need for people to really maintain and correct those. So that is the most important indicators of selecting the places. We have followed the same patterns in Kenya and India where we are doing the training right now. Now, in terms of selecting the people whom we train, both in terms of educators and technicians, the educators, we have some baseline guidelines on how much experience they need and what kind of education that they need. And we look into the sustainability and interest in the program. So for example, in the Pacific, we look for at least 2 years into the solar energy field and at least a basic engineering or a vocational level education that they have already acquired, so that we can go ahead and train them for 2 to 3 weeks, and they in turn can continue to train the other people. I think that would take care of that question, unless Reem wants to add anything.
No?
Great,
That's
thank
it.
you.
You covered many aspects. Thank you, Ambika.
Okay, and the next question was, I think, directed towards IRENA, and they're wondering if IRENA conducts follow-up trainings and if they do any assessment of previous training programs to ensure a continuous measurable impact. So I'll give the floor to Ilham.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you for this question. This is a very good question, and of course, when we do our trainings, for example, in the Pacific, the program just started, so we have the trainees, 52 trainees on board so far, but they are still in the process of being trained and taking the courses to be eventually certified. What happens for the certification program in specific is that they get a provisional certification program. So they get a provisional certificate. They have to prove that they can apply the skills that they have acquired through the training. So they have to actually bring a proof that they have installed an on-grid solar PV system and properly and safely. Once they provide this proof to the training organization, they get an actual full certification, which is valid for 2 or 3 years. I'm not quite sure of the number, I think for 3 years. And then after 3 years, they have to actually update their certification. So they have to attend a refresher course, and then again prove that they have used the knowledge and applied the skills, and then they get the new certificate. So this way we're trying to really ensure that we are continuously monitoring the level of skills and knowledge that we have imparted through the trainings. And for West Africa, this is a very new project. It's actually in the very, very early stages, and we will definitely follow something similar within the context of West Africa. I hope that this answered the question.
Great, thank you, Ilham. This next question, I think, is directed at all the panelists. Someone is wondering what it takes to become a certified trainer for solar PV installation. So I guess what are the criteria to become a certified trainer? Ilham?
Okay, maybe I can take a question. It's okay. This is what I was trying to explain by the flow chart that I try to explain moving backwards. What does it take to actually certify somebody? Of course, it depends from a region to a region. For example, in the Pacific, we have this scheme where if you are a technician, you have to register with the training provider, and then you attend an online course followed by a practical. Actual practical course. It's a 4-day course where you actually disassemble and assemble a solar PV system, and then you have to you will get a provisional certificate, and then you provide a proof that you apply the knowledge and the skills, and then you get the full certificate and so on. In North America, I think Ambika knows more about the system, the NAPSIP system there, and how it is implemented. Basically, if I understood the question correctly, it depends because the different regions, they adapt different steps of how to become a certifier, what sorts of trainings. Should you attend an online training first, or is it only a practical training and then a final exam, and so on and so forth. But basically, if I understood the question right, then you have to identify the training provider in your country or in your region. You have to identify these training providers, attend the courses, attend the final exam, and once you pass, then you will get your certificate, which could be a provisional certificate initially. I'm not sure if this answers the question correctly.
Thank you very much, Ilham. Maybe Ambika or Rim, if you have anything you would like to add to that. Ambika or Rim, would you like to add?
Yes, I can add just a couple things, Stephanie. Thank you for that. Ilham did a very good job of really explaining what it takes to be certified in solar technician or different levels of solar technology. Basically the system is the same, but there are various levels of certification depending on the complexity. Like, for example, in Kenya, there is a level 1, level 2, and level 3. Here in NAPSEP also there are many different refined calibrated levels, starting from something very simple off-grid solar installation to more complex, higher level, utility level solar energy grid connection. So basically one has to have a commensurate level of experience and education to start with, to sit in the, to work towards the certification. Then like Ilham mentioned, you got to fulfill a particular number of courses that have been offered by accredited agencies, which have been accredited by the board that actually accredits the training agencies. And after that, after you fulfill all of that and make an application, you are able to sit in the exam. And then depending on what level of certifications you are looking at, that's where you will be examined, and then you can go step by step. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ambika. I think we'll have time maybe for just 2 more questions here. And please don't forget that if your question wasn't answered, you can go onto the community and ask your question there, and our panelists will do their best to get back to you. The next question I think is a quick one. We have someone wondering if there will be any plans for certification and training for individuals or institutions in Nigeria. So maybe Ilham and then Rim and Ambika.
Yeah, for Nigeria. I mean, the project in West Africa I'm not directly involved with. My colleague Juan Martinez, he's actually the project manager for the project, but he's on leave and could not attend this presentation. But what as far as I know, that we're working with the 5 countries from West Africa, from UNOA, and these are Benin, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Senegal. And after that, towards the end of the program, there is an intention to expand the project to reach to the total number of members in West Africa Economic and Monetary Union. Perhaps Ambika would actually know something more about this, because he's also part of the project manager for this project with IRENA.
Yes, Ilham, I would be happy to compliment on that. Obviously, IRENA program is focused on certain number of countries, because in the beginning it's really difficult to have many countries together to have a regional certification program, because the West Africa certification program is a regional program right now. It has started with certain countries with some basics like Ilham had mentioned before. Now, Nigeria is a very big country. It's the largest country in Africa, and there are a lot of actually questions we also get at Arizona State University. Now, the certification scheme that IRENA was thinking was more from the regional perspective, and then ASU itself is also actually thinking of doing some regional perspective of the certification system in East Africa. So there are two ways to do it. You can do it for a particular country, like Kenya, for example, has already certain certificates and mechanism within the country, and Nigeria, being a very big country, can obviously have its own certification mandate. It has to initiate within Nigeria, and people like IRENA or Arizona State University and other agencies can come and complement. The other possibility, which is more preferable in some ways, like NABCEP, is between US and Canada, the North American Board for Certified Energy Practitioners. And it has become such a good example that many other countries are also looking at it as a model, or sometimes they actually even use the same standards, like in Aruba and some places in the Latin America. So if we come up with a very good and very solid certification system in West Africa, that can expand to other countries, or Nigeria can actually adopt those roles pretty easily. Between US and Canada, sometimes if US develops certain standards, Canada sometimes will adopt, and vice versa. So there are many ways to cut it. You can have a regional system, you can have an in-country system. I do not know of anything very specific going on in Nigeria right now, but because many programs are going in Africa, and Nigeria is a very big country with a lot of renewable energy, I do think if there's a local initiative, there will be opportunities to have a certification program there. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Mbika. And I think we'll just take one more question. I'm sorry to those of you that don't get your questions answered now, but we'll do our best to follow up with you. The last question is asking if there is any directory or repository of people who have been trained or certified through these programs. So Mbika, maybe you can answer first, and then Ilham, and then we will continue to do a quick poll for our viewers.
Absolutely. So in terms of the certification, I will defer it to Ilham, because we are only beginning the program. That is the first one that IRENA is doing in West Africa. So we are just beginning the program, so we probably wouldn't have a registry, but Ilham probably has a plan. In terms of the training, the last 2 years, Arizona State University, through USAID and other funding, has been working with 10 different countries in the Pacific, like I mentioned before, with 11 different partners. We do maintain a registry of the people who have been trained, especially the educators that we have trained, the 30 educators that we have trained in the Pacific, the 16 educators that we are training right now in Kenya. We really keep a tab on them, and the virtual learning environment that Reem was mentioning before is designed so that these educators can continue to chat, become a community, and then connect with each other, and ASU provides them a backup support. Because like I said, the VOCTEC program, the core of the program is those the trainers and educators that we train. So we do maintain the list of those people, which is not exactly public right now, but eventually when people are more interested, I think they can be approached by other people also. Ilham, you want to add anything on certification?
Mbika.
Yes, thank you very much, Mbika. Regarding the certification, as Mbika said, for West Africa, this is a very new project. It's at the very beginning, very early stages. But however, for the Pacific Islands, we have so far, as I mentioned, over 50 installers enrolled, which means that not all of them have actually completed the certification, the trainings, and got the certification process. But what is in our plan is to create a group within the IRENA community, and this is maybe a very good chance for me as well to reiterate what my colleague Stephanie mentioned at the beginning of this presentation when she directed you to the IRENA community, which you can find it on irel.org. And within this community, we would like to create groups, online groups that could be also public, which includes these these certified installers. This would be a very good opportunity for them to stay in touch, for IRENA also to stay in touch with them, and for the outside community to get to contact them, exchange knowledge and information, and just build a very active and vibrant network. This is not a very easy task to do, but we are aware of this and the importance of this, and one of our plans is basically to create a group within the IRENA community, within IREL, that will help to maintain the network active as much as possible. But this hasn't been done so far because the certification scheme in the Pacific has not completed yet, and for West Africa it is at the very beginning stages. And as I mentioned, in West Africa it's a whole framework that we're trying to build, so that will take actually a couple of years until we are able to build such a network. But thank you very much, because this is a very excellent and important point.
Okay, thank you very much, Ilham. So finally, we will just launch a poll. You should see this pop up on your screen. There are 3 questions that we would like if you could answer for us. So the first one is, the webinar provided useful information and insight. Okay, thank you. And the second question was, the webinar presenters were effective. Okay, thank you. And the last question was, overall, the webinar met my expectations. Great, thank you very much. So I would just like to say thank you from IRENA for attending this webinar. I'd just like to remind you once more that if you have any questions following the webinar, to please ask these in the forum on the IRENA community. And if you're interested in joining other IRENA webinars, please visit the IRELP website, www.irena.org/IRELP, and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, I'd like to just open the floor to our panelists, Ambika, Ilham, and Rim, to see if you would like to make any closing remarks. So Ambika, if you'd like to add anything.
Stephanie and Rim and Ilham, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to present and also describe the VOCTEC program and also our collaboration with IRENA. We are extremely happy to be working with you, and we are very happy to be sharing information on what we do to the global community, and especially the lesson learned that we have seen. Hopefully that will be of use to other people. We really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And Rim, if you'd like to add anything.
Sure. Same thing, like Ambika said, I'd like to thank you all for attending the webinar. Thank you, Stephanie, Ilham, and Ambika also for great presentations. And it was really my pleasure to participate in this webinar. I hope that everyone found it beneficial and informative. And please don't hesitate to post your questions on IRELP, or even email us directly if you have any questions that you think we can help with. Thank you very much, and have a great day or evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rim and Ilham. Any closing remarks?
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Reem and Ambika, for the very informative presentations on the ASU activities. From my side, I was really very happy and pleased to join you, and I hope that the audience has benefited and learned something new. And actually, this is a very good opportunity for us as well to share our activities, and I hope that we will get future opportunities to present other projects that we are carrying at IRENA. Thank you very much, everyone. I would be very happy to answer any questions you have. through the audit community or directly via email. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you to all of our panelists very much for all this useful information, and thank you to all of the attendees today. I will now close the webinar.